So I worked at the Exploratorium in San Francisco, many may know it, for about 10 years. And I was developing experiences that engaged kids with science. But in the course of working there, we had partnerships with Autodesk and Google, and I met all of these cool, famous scientists. And there was something that I heard more than once that really got my attention and has kind of informed the work that I do since. These scientists would tell me that they had come to the museum when they were a kid, and this exhibit or that exhibit somehow set them on the path to the careers that they were at. And that's a kind of a powerful idea, and I really wanted to be able to recreate whatever that magic was. So let's look at what that is. So watch the screen carefully and see if there's anything unusual that you notice. So did that perhaps seem weirdly three-dimensional? It's a savvy crowd here. Some people might know how that works, and I'll get to it in a moment. But tune into that curiosity that you're having. If you're a kid, if you're your aunt, how the heck does that work? That is at the heart of inquiry-based learning. And the exhibits that we're developing at the Virtual Science Center are all deconstructing how virtual and augmented reality works to show people, those cool things that you saw in the prior presentation, like how is it that that stuff actually works? Those questions stimulate people to want to know what's next. We're a Silicon Valley not-for-profit located in Sunnyvale, and we are actually ourselves virtual. And the Reinventing Reality, the Science of Virtual and Augmented Reality exhibition, will be traveling across the United States and North America beginning at the end of this year in December at the Lawrence Hall of Science, which is affiliated with UC Berkeley in Berkeley. I like to think of the exhibits that I'll show you and the work that we're doing as these props, these tools that open the door to you guys sharing with other people what it is that you do, what turns you on. Most of us really like what we're doing. Scientists and technologists want to be able to communicate that, and that's what these are doing. This is the scariest slide I'll show you. This is the entire landscape of all of the different research methods that are used in user research. What we focused on in the beginning were focus groups and interviews. We talked to subject matter experts, did deep dives. We create exhibit prototypes, and then those we take out to science centers and see what people do with them, and that's through mediated testing. And then finally, once these things are built, we take them out and we let them go out in the wild, and we step back, and then we continue to use all this information to evolve the exhibits. This is a slide that shows the early focus groups we did in 2016. We had high schoolers, did another focus group with middle schoolers, parents, and teachers. And that all moves forward the exhibits that you'll see. The visitor testing that we did was on this coast at the Tech Museum and on the East Coast at the Maryland Science Center. Two very cool places, and you get an exposure to a wide cross-section of middle school visitors. What I'll show you now are examples of these prototypes. Let's get back to that first strange three-dimensional thing you saw. Turns out that only requires one eye, just like you can drive your car if you have one eye closed, because it's based on perspective. In order to invite people into learning how this works, the first thing you have to understand is what is it to look from a different perspective, and what does that really mean? The way that we did that was we took a method. This is the first reference I've seen to it, which was in the 30s, a lovely book where a method is described where you have a fixed perspective you have a clear plane that's also fixed, and simply draw what it is that you see. And even if you've never done that before, lo and behold, things come out in perfect perspective. This is how that exhibit works. We have a digital model, and then right next to it is an identical physical model. This is that drawing setup that you saw. Visitors are invited to go to one of 3 different perspectives and look carefully. They can do a little bit of tracing. And once they really get that locked in, what they notice is at the digital side that it looks different when you move that headset to different perspectives. We took the display outside the headset, and then visitors discover that, oh, what's happening is that as I move around, the computer is generating a perspective picture for me. And it does that really, really fast, 90 times a second. So when you move around and the images are changing for your perspective 90 times a second, your brain decides that, hey, this is real. And that is what is going on inside the headset. We've simply taken that outside so that we can have this kind of a conversation about it. That experience and a number of others that I'll show you don't require that people wear a headset. So the headsets are great, and we've got them in the exhibition, but we want people to be able to talk about what they're experiencing. A lot of learning happens that way. It makes things more fun and engaging for people of all ages. Again, you guys are a savvy crowd. You've probably at least heard of the words translation and rotation, 6 degrees of freedom, 3 degrees of freedom. So what does that stuff really mean? Turns out that 8th graders are already talking about this stuff. Rotation and translation is something that's in their geometry curriculum at that age. Rotation is what you get in a Google Cardboard type headset. So you can look around for 360 video, but you can't really get into the scene. When you add translation, that gets you moving forward, side to side, backward. That's when you can look under things. You're really in it, and that's where full immersion happens. What we've done in this exhibit is let visitors selectively turn on translation, turn on rotation, experiment with how that works. Here it's only doing translation, but he can change that to rotation. They can also put these things on, and it's pretty crazy when you only have, for instance, translation going on, and it's a neat experience, and people really respond to this one. And all of a sudden, those concepts become real, and then teachers can take this to the next level when they go back to a classroom. I mentioned that the first depth perception experience that you had only involves one eye, but headsets have 2 lenses and ViewMasters, like how is it that that actually works? For this, we took an 1850s style stereoscope. This is the original stereoscope. It's got mirrors in the middle that reflect off to displays on either side. On the left side, we take the VR feed in from exactly what you're getting on the headset. On the right side, we've done the same. The visitor leans in, and they get this fused 3D image. And again, this is what's going on inside the headset. Here's how that looks. To perceive depth in this way, no movement is required. You can just sit still. That's why the ViewMaster worked. We do also let visitors turn this on and animate the characters. Same depth perception is still happening. And of course, in a VR headset, this is combined. Adults like this too. The next several exhibits I'll show you give good examples of how we iterate. So much like the wonderful last talk, you got to take these things out, try them with people, find out what works, what doesn't, and then change, change, change. we talked about 2 visual experiences, but sound is super important in XR. People know that, hey, if you're designing something that's in 360 that you can move around in, sound is great for directing attention. If I jingle some keys and you close your eyes, you can tell where those keys are. As you move around, the sound stays put in space. And that's happening in virtual reality also. How does that work? This was the original concept drawing for this, and this involves making a recreation in virtual reality, but in a scene that visitors don't look at when they're doing the exhibit. That's duplicated. The visitor's head is tracked, but here the headset is up on the forehead, and it doesn't matter how the head is tracked, but you need to know where it's at and where the ears are. Each object has a unique identifier on it, and then there's reader pads on the table so you know what object has been placed where, when, and that tells it to the virtual reality simulation. The localized sound, if you hear a dog barking or a guitar playing, that sounds like it's happening out in space where you put the object. Our design team had the idea of like, hey, this would be a lot more fun with music, and what the activity is you listen to a band player playing a guitar, and you figure out where they're at, and then put the piece there. This is how that works. So you'll see her leaning in. She hears the sound there. It stays, gets louder as she gets closer. And there it goes. I mentioned that there's a virtual reality simulation that the sound is coming from. This is what that simulation is. Very simple, but all those platforms are built. That's where the sounds are coming from. So you're just letting the virtual reality software, Unity in this case, do what it does with the 3D sound. Again, adults like this stuff too. This is, so when you get all of the figurines in place, you get to hear the entire band play. We've talked about vision, we've talked about sound and our hearing. We also have these physical bodies, and we feel sensations in them, and that is increasingly a part of virtual reality. Very often in exhibit development, what we'll do is look to really interesting research and see, is there a way that we could make an exhibit out of that? And in this case, this is out of a lab that does a lot of research, specifically in how we feel our bodies. And this is how that got exhibitized. Again, this is the table is, and the exhibit itself is completely recreated in virtual reality, only this time the visitor is wearing a headset and they can look at it. And this ability to see something and touch it in real world when it's been duplicated, that's something called passive haptics. So this is introducing haptics. In the real world, the visitor's hand gets brushed, they feel that, and in the virtual scene, they also see their hand getting brushed. Then once that linkage is established, and it's an automatic thing with your brain, then you can extend the arm in virtual reality, and your brain just goes along for the ride and goes, whoa, my arm just got longer. I was very skeptical that this one that we'd be able to make this into a good, effective exhibit, but it's worked out really well. So here we are. This one has a little bit of sound at the end. The controller is being used here in this prototyping to track where that brush is. So his arm is getting brushed. Now the arm is extending. And he's having that sensation. So there you have it. It's a very strange experience, and I would dare say something that you really don't easily have outside of virtual reality. This is the automated version of this which we're developing, because when this is in a science center, you don't need to have another person there doing the brushing. This is a fun one. So the last couple of exhibits I'll talk about are addressed to, hey, where are things going? You know, what are some of the emerging technologies in the emerging technology of XR? Many people have heard the term in the industry of foveated rendering. Well, how is it that that really works? And if you walk through the exhibition hall, you'll see some super cool depth cameras. How do those things work? What are they doing? So for this exhibit, we put a depth camera out, let visitors get in front of it, and we rotate the point cloud that's created. So the cameras are making thousands of measurements every second, and in real time, that's shown as a three-dimensional model. Here we found in the first iteration that visitors weren't totally getting that that really was a three-dimensional model. The pin screen that we added helped a lot because that allowed people to try this in a very physical way, because that basically is exactly what is happening in the software. In the next version, we change the axis of rotation, and it makes it tighter. Note that I'm taking a selfie here, just not moving at all. It's the camera's point of view that's changing behind the scenes. The depth camera's at the bottom. This was more effective. People were definitely now getting the concept that, oh, I see that really is getting a 3D model of me. But still, they were having difficulty with what's the connection to virtual and augmented reality. We took it the next level and created a companion augmented reality app. So here's that same exhibit that you just saw, but now another visitor can walk around with an iPad and literally explore the three-dimensionality of that point cloud, look at it from any angle, and now visitors understood, aha, I really get how this can connect. And this is, of course, relates to reality capture, which increasingly will be something that's important for all sorts of things. Sorry, I got mixed up on the last one. This is the foveated rendering. So in foveated rendering, like how is it that works? So when I try to explain this to people, I'll generally say, hey, if you go out on a full moon night and you look at the full moon, that full moon is all that you're ever seeing in detail, and that's about the size of your thumb also. Everything else is in a much lower resolution. We're not aware of this because our eyes are always darting around and our brain is maintaining a partially memory-based image of what we're seeing. Now, in foveated rendering, what happens, because your eye is tracked, the computer only needs to display that area that you're looking at, and the rest of it can be in a much lower resolution. Those are the peripheral pixels. The exhibit that we developed for this involves an external eye tracker. The entire display looks right to the person whose eyes are being tracked because everywhere they're looking, the computer is keeping things in focus. To a bystander, though, their eyes are not being tracked, and they see, whoa, a lot of that display is looking kind of blurry, but the person using it doesn't notice. Here's how that works. We start the experience with calibration, which has two purposes. It helps the eye tracker do a better job, but it also ensures that visitors understand that, oh, my eyes are in fact getting tracked here. And then here, she's looking around, and in the close-up here, you can see the edges of the screen are kind of blurry. And when you're closer to it, it's even more obvious. And it's proved to be a very successful exhibit. Visitors really like working with this one. And they get the concept. A question that I get often is, how can you guys be developing exhibits about technologies that are evolving and changing so fast right underneath your feet? And it's a fair question, and it certainly has its challenges, but the answer is that all of the experiences that we're developing, if you think back to what I've just shown you, these are based in fundamentals. They're not tied to a particular technology. They required the technologies that we have today to even make them work, but how it is that you see in 3 dimensions, how it is that you hear 3D sound, sure, those things can get a lot better. We can swap that out, but the fundamental experiences, the science behind all of this is solid. That itself is not evolving. Thank you all for your time, and I'll take some questions if you guys have any. I mentioned we'll be opening at UC Berkeley, at the Lawrence Hall of Science at UC Berkeley in December. I hope you guys will come check us out.
So before we take our first question, give it up for Bill.